Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jamaica, and persons listening overseas and online. Welcome to a very important press briefing rather, at the Office of the Prime Minister. I want to welcome the Minister of National Security, Dr. Horace Chang, Commissioner of Police, Major General Anthony Anderson, Chief of Defense Staff, Antoinette Weems-Gorman, Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, and in our audience we have the Attorney General, Mr. Derek McCoy, as well as Minister in the Ministry of National Security, Mr. Xavier Main. We will not take long. Just want to advise the media we will be taking questions after the presentations, and I want to invite the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness to start us off this morning. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Jamaica, and the persons living and listening from overseas to this transmission on social media. This morning, at just past midnight, His Excellency, the Governor General, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, declared 2 states of public emergency. One in the entire parish of St. Anne, Clarendon, St. Catherine, and specified areas in the parishes of Kingston and St. Andrew. The other is in the entire parishes of St. James, Westmoreland, and Hanover. The government, after careful consideration on the advice of the security chiefs, decided to advise the Governor General that it was necessary and indeed appropriate to declare states of public emergency in these areas. Since the end of the last state of emergency, we have seen, unfortunately, an increase in criminal activities in these areas and indeed a threat to property and in some instances public disorder. It is important to note that we are also approaching the Christmas season. This will be the first Christmas season since the ending of the DRMA. And already we're seeing and projecting an increase in activities, including entertainment activities, including increased commercial activities, and we are already seeing a demand, a stretch on the resources that we have to guarantee our citizens that they will be able to go about their business in a safe and secure manner. Now, before the Deputy Prime Minister, the Commissioner of Police, and the Chief of Defense Staff give their presentations, let me just say a bit more on the state of public emergency. I have followed closely the political debate in the House and the Senate, as well as the public discourse in the media, including social media. And I want to make a number of things clear for the Jamaican public. The question of whether the SOEs work to achieve the purpose for which they are intended, which is to protect and save lives, has very clearly and definitively been settled. The data could not be more conclusive, and the Commissioner of Police will give those statistics. We should also note that Jamaica is not the only country in the region that is using these exceptional powers, generally defined as a state of public emergency, to treat with the existential threats of gang violence and increasing murders. So the issue surrounding whether or not the SOE is constitutional or not is one that we need to make absolutely clear. In the Roshane Clark case, the judgment of the Constitutional Court made it clear that the purpose for which the SOE had been imposed was a legitimate purpose. That is, the SOE can be used for the purpose for which the government is using them. However, the court took issue with the emergency powers regulations under which Mr. Clark had been detained. Those regulations were made in 2018. The emergency powers regulations that will be in effect for this new declaration of the SOEs are different from the regulations that the court took issue with. We have taken a lot of care and diligence to go through the various issues raised by the court and have made changes to address them. The other issue I want to address is the misconception that persons who are detained under the SOE can be detained indefinitely. Nothing could be further from the truth. Under the emergency powers regulations now in place, the Emergency Powers Review Tribunal, chaired by members appointed by the Chief Justice of Jamaica from among persons qualified to be appointed as a judge of the Supreme Court, they must review the cases brought before them in order for any person to be detained for more than 7 days. So this notion that some are trying to paint that the SOEs allow the security forces to scrape up or net fish and detain persons arbitrarily without charge indefinitely, it is absolutely not true. I also want to point out that in this iteration of the SOEs, bearing in mind that we are approaching the Christmas season, that the construction of the powers that will be deployed in the SOEs will be mindful of commerce, of entertainment, and of persons' movement. So the notion that somehow the SOEs will cripple business or cripple commerce, that's false. Now, I noted that following the vote in the Senate not to extend the previous SOE, the leader of the opposition quite skillfully conceded, this after having vehemently denied the need for a process of detention since we introduced the argument and the proposed legislation for the Enhanced Security Measures Act. It's important to note that the main disagreement with the opposition since we proposed the ESMA was on the issue of detention. So I was very surprised, but pleasantly so, to see the leader of the opposition pretend to recommend a solution, which we had recommended from as far back as 2019, which they rejected. But it means that there is a step forward. Already, within our parliament, we have legislation in the Bail Act and in the ESMA that we are developing, which has this idea, this notion of pre-charge detention. I don't know what is the difference that the leader of the opposition would have with agreeing to the very policy and procedure which is now in the regulations in terms of the powers that we have to detain, which are reviewed by a body appointed by the judiciary, versus detention by the judiciary if we do go to pre-charge detentions. So I want to point out that there has been, a great deal of smoke and mirrors, a great deal of obfuscation, of spinning around the central issue. And what is the central issue? The central issue is well articulated well documented, and it is well understood. And I only need to go as far as the Sustainable Development Goals that we all subscribe to. And one of the Sustainable Development Goals is to preserve life, to ensure that people are free from violence. And that is all the government is trying to do with the powers afforded to us in the Constitution, to save lives and ensure that people are free from violence. We are entering the Christmas season, and I want all Jamaicans to be able to enjoy the Christmas season, free from the threat of violence. We have some really serious criminal threats facing us, and we have to use all the powers at our disposal. I believe Jamaica understands that while the government is trying to improve the legislative framework, improve the capacity of our police to be able to execute their jobs with greater technology, greater efficiency, greater training, in the interim, we have to ensure that our homicide rate and the level of violence that citizens experience on a daily basis does not get to the point where it threatens the collapse of the state. There are several countries in this region where the level of violence, criminally organized violence by gangs, are threatening the very foundations of the state. We will not have that in Jamaica as long as I am your Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, I will now turn over to Minister Morgan, who will continue the direction of the proceedings.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We will now have a presentation from the Commissioner of Police, Major General Anthony Anderson. Major General, sir.
Thank you, Minister Morgan. Most Honorable Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. At the last press briefing on November the 15th, there was a 6.8% increase in murders when compared with 2021. Currently, this has been reduced to 3.6%. Now, in the 2 weeks prior to the declaration, that is weeks 45 and 46, the national murder figures were 36 and 28 respectively. In the 2 weeks during the state of public emergency, that is weeks 47 and 48, the national murder figures were 14 and 11 respectively. And in the week since the SOE, that is week 49, there were 27 murders recorded. Now, in the divisions where emergency powers were in place prior to the declarations of the states of public emergencies, that's weeks 45 and 46, we recorded 30 and 22 murders respectively. In weeks 47 and 48, which represents the period of the state of public emergency, 7 murders were recorded for each week. And in the weeks since the state of public emergency, 20 of the 27 murders recorded nationally were committed in the divisions where the states of public emergencies were previously declared. In other words, at the end of the 14-day period, the divisions where the states of public emergency were in effect recorded an overall 64% decline in murders. That is 17 murders compared to 47 that were recorded 14 days prior. In the 7 days since the SOEs, nationally, 22 murders have already been recorded, 17 of which have been in the divisions where the SOEs were declared. It is important that we put the impact of the SOE into perspective with these numbers and the fact that within the first 10 days of the state of public emergency, there was one murder recorded from the border of Manchester and Clarendon, through Clarendon, St. Catherine, through St. Andrew South, Kingston West, Kingston Central, Kingston East, to the border of St. Thomas. One murder in the first 10 days. Secondly, we saw 3 consecutive days, that's days 8, 9, and 10, November the 22nd to the 24th, where no murders were recorded island-wide. The last time such a trend was recorded was in 2012. Thirdly, we saw where nationally murders were reduced by 46% over the 14-day period. When the SOEs are declared, the people in the violence-plagued communities feel safer, and the impact tends to be immediate. As we move into the 2022 Christmas season, which is the first Christmas since 2019 that will be without restrictions, the demands on us will increase. The need for greater presence in commercial spaces to prevent robberies, increased public order and traffic management requirements, the large number of permitted events, at the moment it's 1,892 over the season so far, and the occurrence of non-permitted events will create significant strain on our resources. It will be more difficult than normal to carry out the activities and maintain the operational tempo associated with violence reduction in hotspots and targeting of violence producers and criminal gangs. The demonstrable efficacy and flexibility that the use of the emergency powers facilitates will be essential over the next 6 weeks to meet all of the security demands that are a feature of this period. Therefore, in consultation with the CDS, we requested the use of emergency powers under a limited state of public emergency in the previously named parishes and police divisions, with the St. Andrews Central and St. Anne Police Divisions being new additions. St. Andrews Central borders all 5 other policing divisions in Kingston. Intelligence is indicating that the movement of gangsters and illegal guns through and in the division is likely to cause an increase in murders if not addressed, along with the other divisions within the Southern Crescent. With respect to St. Anne, intelligence indicates increased criminal activities, not so much in the tourist areas, but in some of the hotspots and interior spaces, as migrant criminals attempt to establish themselves in various communities. We're also detecting associations with criminal networks in other divisions. We have had our security forces personnel, police and soldiers, relentlessly pushing ahead against these violent criminals and their facilitators. Operation Relentless 2 continues. Our members have been going non-stop for months as they recognize the need to save lives and provide police services to the population. As most people go off to enjoy the celebrations and time with family, our officers will be at work to ensure the conditions for a peaceful period are created for others. I wish to commend our officers and those who assist us at the JDF for their unwavering commitment in difficult circumstances. In closing, I want to reassure the public that while we conduct various operations in the declared spaces, we will attempt to manage the impact of our activities on persons going about their normal business. The scheme of operation is to minimize disruptions for persons going about their lawful activities and simultaneously disrupt and deter criminals and gangsters as far as the emergency powers allow us to. Even so, there is likely to be some disruption and delays. We will be monitoring this closely to resolve any issues as soon as possible. However, at times, based on intelligence, disruptions are unavoidable. We ask for your patience and understanding as we collectively respond to the violence in these areas so declared. The public can assist by complying with the directions of security force personnel, where applicable, adhering to curfew guidelines, and assist with providing information on guns, gunmen, and gangs in your communities. For persons residing outside of the SOE boundaries of the parishes or police divisions so declared, please advise us if you see persons turning up in your communities that you may have concerns about. The public can contact us by calling the JCF tip line at 811, police emergency at 119, or Crime Stop at 311. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Major General Anderson. We will now have a presentation from the Chief of Defense Staff, Rear Admiral Antoinette Weems-Gorman. Rear Admiral.
Prime Minister and Minister of Defense, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of National Security, the Honorable Horace Chang, Minister of State in the Ministry of National Security, Honorable Xavier Main, other government ministers present, Attorney General, Commissioner of Police, Major General Anthony Anderson, members of the press, good morning. The Jamaica Defense Force, as part of the Joint Security Force apparatus, supports the recommendation for the redecoration of a state of public emergency across the parishes of Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James, Clarendon, St. Catherine, Kingston, and sections of St. Andrew. However, this new state of public emergency, as was stated before, now includes the parish of St. Anne and the police division of St. Andrew Central. 1 week on from the end of the last called state of public emergency, it is safe to say that what necessitated our recommendation of the previous SOEs still remain. This state of public emergency will give the Jamaica Defense Force more flexibility in how we can support the JCF in the declared areas. This is evidenced by the fact that over the period 15th to 28th of November, that's the period of the last SOE, there was a total of approximately 2,413 deployments by the Jamaica Defense Force in support of the JCF. This was an overall increase of 181% deployments when compared to the previous period or the 14 days prior to the launch of the SOE. For the period under the review, the increased deployments resulted in a 64% decrease in murders and 46% decrease in shootings. These areas under the state of public emergency shall consist of the entire area of land comprising the parishes of Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James, St. Anne, Clarendon, and St. Catherine within the established parish boundaries, as well as all the police divisions in Kingston and St. Andrew, except for St. Andrew North. The statistics from the last state of public emergency show that some ground was made. Murders were down, shootings were down, and the successes of the security forces were clearly present. So I take this time to ask every law-abiding citizen, not just those living in the areas under the now declared SOE, to see these enhanced security measures as an opportunity to join the fight. Citizens should share information and fully participate in their own security so that we can curb the violence in our nation. Of course, crime affects all Jamaicans directly or indirectly. Therefore, you can play your part. You can do so by using the JDF tip line at 876-837-8888 or the JCF tip line at 311. In closing, let me reaffirm that the JDF is committed to its support to the JCF in securing and safeguarding Jamaica and Jamaicans. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief of Defense Staff. We'll now have the final presentation by Minister of National Security, the Honorable Dr. Horace Chang. Dr. Chang.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Morgan. Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister, Major General Anthony Anderson, Commissioner of Police, Chief of Defense Staff, Admiral Weems-Gorman, my Minister of State, Mr. Xavier Main, Attorney General. The state of public emergency has evolved from its first inception, both in legislation and practice. Even so, it remains an important tool to be used in national crises, especially in violent situations. With a consistent homicide rate of over 49 per 100,000, we continue in a state of crisis where violence is concerned. It's a clear and present danger to the lives of many Jamaicans. Therefore, the government considers it important to take action as necessary to give the security forces extraordinary powers. We consider it appropriate to utilize this tool to save the lives and restore public order. The way this government utilizes the SOE, it is to save lives, not just one life, but many Jamaican lives. I re-emphasize and emphasize this particular point because many of the critics tend to find I tend to use statistics in a very mischievous way, if I may put it that way. I'm reminded of a short course in university that many of us had to do called the use and abuse of statistics. And in the discussion of the state of public emergency, I think that is a suitable topic to raise because many people tend to go all over on statistics. The government is particularly concerned about using the state of public emergency to protect Jamaicans, law-abiding citizens, and save lives. The statistics presented by the Commissioner of Police clearly outline the need for the state of public emergency. Protecting the lives of the Jamaican people is the ultimate responsibility of the executive. We'll never be afraid to take the required steps to protect the lives of our people, the law-abiding citizens. Reference are occasionally made to the individual exception of a contention between a security person and the individual in the community, but in fact, the most important endorsement and reflection of the professionalism of the police, security forces, that every time an attempt is made to even take down a checkpoint, there's popular response, popular demonstration against such activity. Only yesterday, such an activity took place in Augustown and one in Western Kingston. The citizens want to have the presence of the security forces with the required powers. The regulations that have been criticized have been reconfigured so that the law-abiding citizen will be protected and the lawless restricted in a manner that is demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society that is under this violent siege. The state of public emergency is an effective short-term measure and a powerful force multiplier that allows us to save lives. It is being used in collaboration with other programs to strengthen the security forces in the medium term. In the short term, it is the most effective tool in protecting law-abiding citizens. The government's continued commitment is beyond question. Our use of the state of public emergency as a protective shield of the people is designed to protect the law-abiding citizens and restrict the lawless, disrupt the gangs. Law-abiding citizens must therefore be assured that the security forces are utilizing targeted and strategic operations to apprehend the violence producers and allow society to return to good order. They believe they can hide, but we are confident that with the extraordinary powers and the additional tools the security forces have, we'll find them, apprehend them, and prevent them from carrying out their heinous crimes. Our planned restoration of normalcy in the communities named will disrupt the gangs, save lives, and will utilize the most effective short-term legitimate crime-fighting tool at our disposal, the state of public emergency. We wish for Jamaicans to have a safe holiday period and one which they can enjoy a level of normalcy and safety in their community.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chang. We will now be opening the floor to questions from members of the media who are present. I want you to note that PM has an appointment in Clarendon, so he has to leave here very shortly. So we are going to say one question per media host, and we can start by identifying yourself and your media host so we can take the questions.
Kimon Francis from the Gleaner.
Thank you,
PM, you had suggested in the past that the administration might need SOEs for up to 7 years. As at December 6th this year, how much longer do you project that we will need SOEs continuously?
Prime Minister.
Thank you. Let me apologize if I'm not able to stay with you. I leave the island today, and I will explain later why I'm leaving. But I appreciate the question. Let's be clear. every country needs to have in its back pocket emergency powers. It's the last resort through the legal and constitutional process to exercise the full force of the state to protect itself. So this notion that you can't use the SOEs is a rubbish notion. If the state is under threat, as it is now, people don't realize it because we have so far managed it very well. But there are several states in this region which are under threat. And they have reacted in far more stringent ways than this government has. We only need to look to El Salvador. And this morning, we have seen that Honduras has taken similar measures. There are those of us who live in a dream world, or maybe they're trying to trick the population who may not be aware of the situation. But I live in the world of reality. And the reality is that there is organized criminal violence that is at a level that threatens the state. It threatens the security and safety of every Jamaican. You just need to ask the people in the communities that face it daily. The people who complain about the SOEs are not the people who benefit from them in the communities where they have to hide under their beds, hide their daughters, can't go to church, and they see their sons and their boyfriends and husbands killed. That's a reality. The government is trying to build up our capacity so that we can respond without the suspension of or abrogation or abridging of any rights that would normally apply. So there is this false notion about proximity policing and more boots on the ground. There has been no administration that has increased the size of our security forces like this one. None. Just last week, 300 more security officers, police, were placed into service. And a month before, I attended the graduation of 300 more. And before that, there were 300 more. Before, our attrition rate was greater than our recruitment rate. Now, with this new commissioner, our recruitment rate far exceeds the attrition rate, by far. Under the JDF, we have expanded the JDF from about 4,000. CDS, where are we now? Rubbish that argument about not putting enough boots on the ground. No other administration has. We have. You talk about proximity policing. This administration has increased the tactical effectiveness and efficiency of the police force, where they are using intelligence to nab the criminals at the point at which they are planning or committing crimes. And you would have seen the evidence of this brought into media, plus several others which have not made it to the media. We're capturing them as they traverse the highways. Not to mention the over 300 murders that we prevent from happening each year, which doesn't make the media. You would know about it. But there are those who are entrenched in the system for only political reasons, who parade as if they are independent, but they are political activists trying to obfuscate, confuse. For what purpose? To save your life? No, to gain power. I ask you to be wary of those persons. They don't have your interest at heart. Emergency powers are an important part of any society. Our Constitution places serious restrictions on how they are used because of the history of how they were used before. I am mindful of this because it was my political organization that suffered under the misuse by the very administration that is now pretending as if somehow they have recently discovered a passion for constitutional and human rights matters. It is not the intention of the government to abuse these powers. And in the various iterations of the SOEs, we have improved the regulations, taking into consideration the public debate, taking into consideration the arguments put forward by our courts, which we welcome. It has helped to refine the measure as it is provided for in the Constitution. But I wish to use this platform today to make it absolutely clear that those who take comfort that the opposition will continue to derail the government's attempt to save lives and reduce violence, that there is no such comfort to be had, because the government will be relentless on all fronts to combat your criminal and violent intent. All fronts. I am disappointed that we do not have a unified front. Now, can you imagine if the leader of the opposition had come to his senses 3 years ago? Let us say it was his idea about pre-charge detention. Let's give it to him because he tried to claim it. Why not come with that idea when we proposed detentions, instead of vehemently opposing, and proposing nothing, and then now try to use the non-production of the ESMA as an excuse for not supporting the SOEs? They have no real care about anyone's life. In everything that they have said, not one statement about saving lives. Not one. My job is to ensure that my people are safe. And I will not stop until that is achieved. So will we need the SOEs? Yes, there will always be SOEs. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras, they're all having to use these powers. France had an SOE for 2 years straight. Countries which we seek to pattern, they have ongoing states of public emergency in different areas to combat different issues. It's a reality. Is it something that we want to do forever and ever and ever? Absolutely not. But I think in the modern world, our Constitution needs to be upgraded so that those powers can be easily and effectively used when the circumstances require them. Emergency powers have always been an executive tool, because it is the executive that has to respond and react. We need to, I think, upgrade and recraft how the emergency powers are used in our Constitution to deal with the modern threats that exist. I leave the island today to head to Washington for, among other things, to start the process of getting a more intense cooperation in treating with the foreign actors in our local crime, those dons, those who have migrated overseas, that in this season they will be sending the bag of rice and all the other goodies in the barrel. But secreted in that bag of rice, wrapped up in that blanket, will be a gun. or ammunition or parts thereof. Not for your benefit, but to give to a youngster to kill. They can't feel that they are free to influence, direct, solicit, and finance crime in Jamaica. So I head to Washington to have meetings with the Justice Department, the FBI, and other entities there, because I'm serious. If you are overseas and you are sponsoring, directing, soliciting, or financing crime in Jamaica, we're going to get you. That's part of building the capacity to treat with the crime that we exist without having to resort to emergency powers. So the government is pursuing on two axes. One is to increase our capacity. And, you know, people talk about crime plan. That's just another smokescreen. Any crime plan that has been laid in Jamaica, it is this government that is fulfilling it. If the crime plan is to include infrastructure, we have built the most police stations. We have brought in the most vehicles. We are increasing our intelligence capabilities. I mean, when you come to the JDF, border control, domain control, equipment and capacity. And then, if you talk about human resource training, you just look at our officers today and the training that they go through. But yet, there are those who continue to talk this nonsense. We have a comprehensive plan Secure Jamaica, which will ensure a defense for Jamaica for any threat. In the new domain that is emerging, cyber, there is no other government that has done what we have done to have a presence and control in the cyber domain. So I want Jamaicans to be appreciative of what we are doing. This situation did not arise yesterday. It is 30 years in the making. 30 years of lack of investment and unsophisticated approaches to our national security. And now you have an administration that appreciates and understands what national security is about. And we're not only talking, we are putting the resources there. So, yes, as long as it is needed, this government will use states of public emergency. But we are increasing our capacity as much as possible, as far as possible, and as far as our budget allows, to be able to use normal policing powers to control and suppress criminal violence in Jamaica.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Prime Minister has to leave right now, but the other members of the platform are here to take your questions. Yes. Could you identify yourself and your media house, please? No. There's a lady behind you, Alexander.
Zara Burton, I'm with 18 Degrees North. Perhaps this question, I'm trying to figure out who this question should be directed at, but it would either be the JDF or the Ministry of National Security. Yesterday, there was an announcement of Israel being visited yet again by our government, this time by Minister Vaz. I wanted to know on the issue of cybersecurity, what were the deliverables, what was specifically accomplished, and also are we using Pegasus software here in Jamaica, made by the NSO Group?
Thank you very much, Ms. Burton. That's a question that I think Minister Vaz, who made the visit, would be more appropriate to respond to, because he made the visit and he had the discussions, and we do not discuss particular aspects of our national security in the public domain. So we will not be able to respond at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alexander Scott, Nationwide News. I think this would be directed to the Minister of National Security, Dr. Chan. During the last state of emergency, how many persons who were detained have been charged, and of those who have been detained and charged, how many of those have been from the 300 known violence producers, sir?
Commissioner?
Okay, so during the last one, we had ended up with 53 people in detention, and we filtered through them. At the close of it, there were 16 that we released on the final day. Of that, it's really only a few of them have been charged who were in at the time. Normally, it takes a little while for us to gather the evidence required when these people are removed from communities. They still provide, once it's known that they'll be coming back soon, it's very difficult to get people to cooperate with us. For the period that we had them, though, as you can see, there's a significant drop-off in violence and violent crime, but it doesn't just impact those ones. It's not just a matter of detention. There are a suite of operations that take place under a state of public emergency that disrupt, that cause persons to make different decisions and choices who are in the criminal underworld, and also those who we know that are significant violence producers to bring them in. Now, the 300 number that has been going on, it's not only 300 people involved in violence in Jamaica. We take some 700 guns off of the road per year, and people are still out there shooting. So the 300 number, I suspect, came up because we have between cases with evidence and intelligence, significant intelligence packages, we have 300 people who we're targeting at the moment, but some will come off and others will come on. So it's really how much we can target within our capacity at any one time. And that's a work in progress always. As the Prime Minister said, we are also working with our overseas partners on some of this. We have a target list of 30 who reside in the US, who we are doing some work on. So those who are over there, who believe that they are supporting violence and crime in Jamaica, and they're doing so without anybody paying attention to them, they're sorely mistaken. And along with our partners, we'll deal with that aspect of things also. Okay?
Thank you, Commissioner. We only have time for one more question. Minister Morgan had to regrettably step away, but we will continue with just one more question.
Morning, I'm Jamila Maitland from TVJ News. As a reporter, visiting some of these communities that have SOEs, targeted operations seem to be where residents almost always have an issue. Dunkirk, for example, has been a community where there has been lots of shootings and murders. When we visited there, the tents were just there, no police, no soldiers. Persons were vending underneath the tents, gambling underneath the tents. The reports from residents are that the police and the soldiers are not there. They know the times, they know these spaces, they know what's going on. Is there anything that we'll be seeing different in some of these communities? And I speak specifically to Dunkirk, targeted operations, police officers coming in the spaces and doing what they should be or what is expected to be done underneath these SOEs.
Could you tell me when you went there? When did you go?
Well, the tents have been moved, so there's selling going on, steam, but tents are not there.
No, I'm saying, when did you go? Sorry.
Last Thursday.
Last Thursday. Okay. So one of the features of it, as you know, it's something that has always been said. Why are people always at the same place? Now, as the CDS said, our deployments in these spaces have increased and not decreased. You may not see them at that point, as we move assets around, depending on what the intelligence is saying to us. Now, in the whole of the sort of parade down to East Downtown Kingston, Parade Gardens, even going up into Rose Gardens and all of that space, the police have been working extensively with the population there. And I'm not sure if you're aware, certainly under the Zone of Special Operations and the Kingston Central Police and Kingston East Police have been working in that area. Just, I think the weekend prior to the state of public emergency, we actually got Parade Gardens and Rose Gardens together at a function down in Breezy Castle, and so we're doing work on that. Now, we have to assess, because we're looking at violence reduction and murder reduction, where best to put assets to achieve that. And clearly, if we had assets that could be everywhere, we would do that. But we put them in place in strategic ways that allow us to get a 64% reduction in murders. That allow us, in the same space whilst you were there, between the border of Manchester, that's all of Clarendon, St. Catherine, St. Andrews South, Kingston West, Kingston Central into Kingston East to the border of St. Thomas. When you find you have 10 days with only one murder in the entire space, it means that something you're doing is working. So it may not, you're looking at that particular point, speaking to some residents, we speak to them too. One of the features of what residents want is more of us. You notice that there's always a cry for having more. What we have is what we have. As you say, we're rolling them out as fast as we can, but we have to be moving and redeploying them. So they may come back, they may leave, but they're around. That is how you get those numbers, right?
Of our press conference for this morning. We wish to thank everyone, members of the media, those listening overseas. Thank you for joining us, and have a safe and productive Tuesday.